Anthony, how can teachers make the most of employer engagement in schools?
Okay. From our work, from the work which I've been involved in, I'm going to give you 7 top tips. Right? Number 1,
That's good.
be authentic. All right? It's really important to get that real world experience. The more real it is, the better. Young people, they can kind of see through fakes very easily. In many countries, there's a marketplace as it has emerged around training after sort of compulsory education or missions to universities, kind of the stepping stones into employment, and there's a marketplace there. It can distort things. So employer engagement, the most important thing to begin with is be authentic, make it as authentic as possible. Secondly, make it commonplace. Do lots of this, make it a part and parcel of everyday education, everyday schooling. All our research shows is that the more is more when it comes to employer engagement. You want to do lots of this stuff, and it should be happening all the way through civic education. Thirdly, check in with the kids. What do they think about it? Do they think it was helpful? One of the things which we've found is that the theory behind all of this tells us that it's working where young people are gaining new and useful information. Ask them, what did they think about it? Do they think they were getting new and useful information? Do they value it? Our studies show that if they did, that they were right. They do get value later on. They do benefit. Fourthly, vary what you do. Different activities are related to different outcomes and developments for young people. Thinking about young people, developing understanding about careers, broadening their horizons, developing kind of the sort of skills which are very difficult to learn in the classroom about preparing for interview, being interviewed, work experience and so on. So vary what they do. Variation is very important. Fifthly, contextualize what they're doing. Professional careers advice is not a replacement for professional careers advice, it's an addition to professional careers advice. It's one thing to open the eyes of a young person, it's altogether another thing to manage to decide between a BTEC here, an HNC there, or a foundation degree somewhere else, or an apprenticeship route. So professional careers advice is really important within all of this. Next, personalise. Young people are different. They come into their episodes of employer engagement with different backgrounds, different experiences, different understandings. You need to understand that. We need to understand that if we don't think about that seriously, we can just reproduce social inequalities through our employer engagement. So personalise. Some young people need more of this than others. We should be prepared to weight it. It's important, I think, sometimes to make all young people do things. Coercion has a place. Young people often, will police themselves. You see them go around a careers fair. They go around with 2 or 3 mates. They edit themselves on what they're willing to do or not willing to do. So coercion does have a place, but personalisation does as well. And then finally, start young, because our evidence suggests this is, where we see the strongest case or the strongest rationales for the economic benefits later on is in the attitudes and assumptions of young people, and they start young. They start in primary school.
I just wanted to ask you about that, but before I do, I think we should just say these 7 key tips sound really practical, really something that any teacher or careers advisor might want to have at their fingertips to refer to looking at this subject. So you've mentioned start early. How early should one start?
Well, in primary, employer engagement is a lot about bringing learning to life. So, we work with a lot of primary school teachers, and we work very closely with the National Association of Head Teachers, who represent the great majority of head teachers in primary. And what they'll often say to us is that, and my own children will say to me, who are primary age, that they kind of see the point of literacy and numeracy, but they don't quite understand what the extrinsic value of it is. They struggle sometimes to understand what the point of this is, and they're in an environment where attainment's very important, where success is very important, but that motivation which underpins a young person's engagement in learning comes from something outside of the classroom as well as the charisma of the teacher. And so I think, well, how old do we start? How young do we start? And I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't start engaging schools in their community, as they have done for not hundreds, certainly decades and decades.
Sure.
Primaries are engaged in their community. They do like to try and illustrate, the points of learning, and we see reading partners and number partners and enterprise activities. There's a lot of demand in primary schools for these activities. There's a lot of history there because they add something new, additional, helpful to teachers trying to create an engagement in learning, a love of learning amongst their young children.
So career learning in primary schools is a really important feature. But then looking at secondary schools, it's really connecting that schooling to employer engagement and helping people make sense of subjects and how they link to the world of work. Am I being oversimplistic?
Well, I think this is really important. This is one of the aims of the whole body of employer engagement. It does multiple things. It helps in progression. It helps to make sense of learning. It helps in preparing young people for in developing skills which are very hard to develop in the classroom, linked to recruitment exercises or recruitment activities, for example. So it can do different things, and I think we should try and step back, look at the different things that it can do, and then think, how can we most strategically and tactically and thoughtfully use different types of employer engagement to gain the outcomes we want to achieve.
Sure. So if I'm a teacher and I'm just coming into this as a new area, where do I start? Where can I go to get more resources to equip me to do a really good job?
Well, one of the things which we do at Education Employers is try and make it as easy as possible for professionals to access good quality research. And I say to professionals, read up. We summarise reports and studies, articles, books, which we've written, but other people have done as well. We have a high standard to make sure that you understand the methodologies and you can rely upon what they've got to say. But sort of think about use these resources to think about how can we make most sense of these sorts of activities, and how can we use them as successfully as possible with our young people to gain the different outcomes we want to achieve.
So it's a question of go to that website and actually look at those resources and make the most of them.
Absolutely.